I went through a chill breakup with the princess of Beijing's high society, Isabella. She got back together with her old flame. As her stand-in, I tearfully took a 40 million yuan breakup payout and quietly stepped aside. Super classy. Right? Then what happened? Not long after we split, she suddenly hunted me down, threatening my life. I swear, I didn't do anything wrong. All I did was go on a blind date and find someone new. Was that really such a big deal? So, wait, you're going on a blind date at a fancy Western restaurant, but your date hasn't shown up yet. Sitting across from me was the restaurant owner and my good buddy Jason. He looked at me like I was crazy. "Who are you meeting?" he asked. "The granddaughter of my grandpa's old friend." I shrugged, swirling the ice in my whiskey glass, trying to sound casual. The old man specifically wanted me to meet her before he passed, just to see if we click. Jason nodded, hesitated a bit, then lowered his voice. "What about Isabella? You loved her so much for years, and you're cool with ending it like this?" Lightly is a good word, but not exactly right. I took a sip and smiled weakly. The breakup fee was 40 million win. Not exactly light. That was the only decent thing she had left. Jason shook his head, frustrated, but then his face changed as he rubbed his nose. "Victor, sorry. I didn't get your stuff back from Isabella's place." I paused, confused. "What do you mean? I got everything back. After the breakup, I went back to the countryside for my grandpa's funeral and just got back to the city yesterday. I had to rely on you to help pack my things since I took the breakup fee, and it was only polite to clear out and give her space." Jason looked genuinely spooked. "When I went to pack your stuff yesterday, Isabella wasn't at the office. She was home, just sitting on the sofa staring at me without saying a word. It freaked me out. When I finally finished packing and was about to leave with the suitcase, she suddenly said, 'Jason, you've got nice hands. How about I chop them off?' Damn, I almost peed myself. That sounded exactly like Isabella. The Liu family has total clout in Beijing. If the Liu princess wanted to chop someone's hands off, it'd be done in no time. But it didn't seem like something she'd actually do. We had such a smooth and dignified breakup. Everything was settled. Why would she mess with my stuff for no reason?" Jason leaned in and whispered, "I don't think she really wants to break up with you." I shook my head. "That's impossible. Everyone knows about me and Isabella. Years ago, Isabella's first love, Daniel, left her to chase his dreams. He didn't just reject her advances, he left the country without saying goodbye. Isabella was devastated for a long time. I stayed by her side, silently supporting her, never expecting anything in return. But then, on Christmas morning 4 years ago, when I handed her a cup of honey water to help with her hangover as usual, she suddenly looked at me and asked, 'Victor, do you like me?' I blushed and shook my head, stammering. 'Yeah, but don't worry. I don't expect us to be together,' she said. 4 words, 4 years. I replaced Daniel, caring for Isabella wholeheartedly for 4 years. Although she stayed cold towards me, she publicly acknowledged me as her boyfriend. Everyone said I was the best stand-in ever. I thought we'd spend our lives together. But on our 4-year anniversary, Daniel came back with just one sentence, 'Isabella, I miss you.' He took her straight to the airport, and that day I was home decorating with balloons for Isabella. In the end, I didn't see her. All I got was a 40 million yuan breakup payout. Her first love returned, and she couldn't wait to ditch me. How could she not want to break up? I shrugged, pretending to be chill. All I hope now is that in this big city, I never run into those two again." Jason nodded. "Yeah, everyone knows about your relationship. Running into them again would be super awkward." My eyes narrowed as I glanced over Jason's shoulder, spotting Isabella walking through the restaurant door. She paused briefly before heading my way. I sighed. "Jason, you really have a way of making things happen." I chose to have my blind date at Jason's restaurant for 3 main reasons. First, it's close to my main hot pot spot. Second, it's near where the lady I'm meeting lives. Third, Jason and his wife started from scratch and aren't part of Isabella's circle. So, I figured the chances of running into someone we know here would be slim. Who knew? Jason gave an awkward smile, his voice shaky. As we talked, Isabella had already reached the table. She didn't say anything, just raised an eyebrow at Jason, who quickly ditched me like a scared chicken. Tisk, big guy. Is Isabella really that intimidating? I raised an eyebrow, poured a glass of whiskey, and gave Isabella a calm smile. Miss Lou, care to join me? It had been over 10 days since we broke up. Seeing her again, I was surprisingly calm. Isabella didn't move. Her delicate, bright eyes fixed on me, her stunningly beautiful face radiating pressure even without speaking. It was like the aura of someone in power. I tightened my grip on the glass, but my smile stayed the same. After half a minute of silence, Isabella finally smiled, raised an eyebrow, and picked up the whiskey glass. She held it but didn't drink, her gaze probing. When did you get back? Yesterday, I replied with a smile. I have a business to run. Unlike the great Miss Lou, I can't afford to waste time. Isabella nodded, her expression easing a bit. Here to see Jason. I paused, about to respond, when a stunningly beautiful woman with a cold and elegant vibe, dressed in a white chiffon blouse and a black pencil skirt, stood at the table. She glanced at me and Isabella, a hint of hesitation in her bright eyes, her voice smooth. Victor? It's me. Are you Sophia? Sophia nodded, then looked at Isabella. Did I come early, or did you set up another blind date? As soon as she asked, Isabella's face darkened. You're here for a blind date? Yes, I'm here for a blind date. I smiled slightly. So, shall I not see you off, Miss Lou? Isabella glanced at me, her brow furrowing more, but she didn't get up. Instead, her gaze shifted to Sophia, her eyes darkening. Miss Lou, I lowered my tone, issuing a second polite invitation for her to leave. The way you're scrutinizing my guest is pretty rude. Why the rush? Isabella raised an eyebrow, staring at me with a look I couldn't quite read. Suddenly, she smirked and let out a light scoff. After all, we've shared a bed for 4 years. How about I check out your new partner for you? I couldn't help but clench my fists. Isabella, how much more do you want to hurt me? No need to worry yourself, Miss Lou. I smiled, looking up at Isabella, though my heart felt cold. My grandpa picked this person for me. His judgment isn't wrong. Isabella's eyes narrowed slightly, giving me a probing look, but she stayed silent. The sudden ring of a phone broke the tension. Isabella frowned, took out her phone, and her expression softened immediately. Isabella, aren't you here yet? A deep, magnetic voice was clear enough for even me to hear. Peter. Isabella's gaze swept across my face, her eyes darkening. I'm here, downstairs. Yeah, I ran into a friend, exchanged a few words, and now I'm coming up. A friend, just exchanged a few words. I smiled, my fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms, the pain hitting my heart. Isabella hung up the phone, stood up calmly, smoothed her dress, and said, Please go ahead. I won't disturb you. I watched her walk upstairs, a dull ache in my chest. Sophia, however, sat down across from me with a serene expression, her delicate features softening into a smile. So, Mr. Su, is it my turn now? My emotions snapped back as I looked at Sophia, somewhat surprised. Miss Jiang, you still want to continue? Sophia slightly curled her red lips, her expression completely natural. Why wouldn't I want to continue? First, I have judgment and I can see what's going on here. I don't think Mr. Su did anything wrong. Second, I have a normal perspective on life, so I don't care if a guy has had other women before. Lastly, aside from the blind date, I have another matter I need you to take responsibility for. Mr. Su? For a moment, I didn't quite catch what she meant. A wealthy young lady asking me to take responsibility for what? I swear, I don't even know her. Sophia's lips pressed together. Suddenly, she said, I have a dog that eats skewers. My brain felt like it was about to short-circuit. What? Sophia took out her phone and placed it in front of me. I looked down, confused. With just one glance, I was stunned. It was surveillance footage from a streetlight's perspective. The timestamp was from the night Isabella and I broke up. The 40 million win check was lying on the ground. I was clutching a bottle of wine, sitting on the curb outside my hot pot restaurant, crying like a dog. Next to me was an actual dog, sneaking bites of skewers I had packed from the restaurant. Little dog, why are you wandering around when you have a tag? Were you abandoned too? Damn it, so was I. These skewers are cold. Don't eat them. See that restaurant? I own it. Come here tomorrow at the same time. Okay, we'll be bros in misery. I'll treat you to good food every day. In the video, the drunken me was holding the dog's left ear, rambling on and on. Outside the video, I was so embarrassed I wanted to dig a hole and bury myself in it. The surveillance is clear, and my buddy really came back the next night. He waited outside the hot pot restaurant all night. But Mr. Sue, you didn't show up. After hearing Sophia's words, my expression froze because the next day, I received a call about my grandpa's critical condition and went back to the countryside. Sophia locked her phone screen, looked up at me with a faint gaze, thought for a moment, and added, "Since that night, my buddy has truly understood the cruelty of the human heart, and he's been depressed at home ever since. I tricked a dog into becoming reclusive. This guilt is too heavy to bear. I'll treat him. I must treat him. Let's go buy skewers now and get the best dog food. I need to apologize to Buddy." Sophia slightly pursed her lips, then pulled up her WeChat QR code and placed it in front of me. Clearly, she didn't fully trust me. I quickly took out my phone and scanned her contact info. Seeing the cute golden retriever in her profile picture, I covered my face. "Miss Jiang." "Don't worry, I'll take responsibility," Sophia replied, not saying much. "Let's go." I quickly got up to follow her, but just as I took a step, I heard the sound of high heels clicking from upstairs. Almost instinctively, I looked up at the second-floor staircase. Isabella was standing there, her gaze deep as she looked at me. Behind her stood a few young ladies who always looked down on me. During my 4 years with Isabella, these women never thought much of me. I was about to leave when a man in a tailored black suit with an elegant demeanor walked down from upstairs. I frowned and looked at Jason, who was standing at the bar, frozen like a statue. "Why is Daniel here too?" Seeing Daniel, Jason's face changed, and he quickly shook his head at me, mouthing exaggeratedly, "I didn't know." Daniel, upon seeing me, perked up as if he had no clue that Isabella and I had been together for 4 years. He greeted me enthusiastically. "Victor, you're here too. Long time no see." I forced a smile and nodded. "Hope you've been well." Daniel pointed at the group behind him, looking helpless. I just got back to the country. Isabella and her friends insisted on throwing me a welcome party here. I didn't really want to come, but then Isabella insisted on opening a hot pot restaurant on this street for me. So I came to check out the new location. After saying that, Daniel turned around and wrapped his arm intimately around Isabella's waist. Then he looked at me. "I remember you're in the hot pot business too, right? So now we'll be in the same industry. Why don't you come help me check out the place?" "He's getting into the hot pot business too." I quickly raised my eyebrows and looked at Isabella. Actually, competition within the same industry is normal. If it were someone else, I wouldn't care. But Daniel's family owns a massive empire worth billions. Why would they need to open a hot pot restaurant? My family used to be one of the top families in Beijing's elite circle. But my parents passed away early and unexpectedly. Back then, I was just a clueless kid, and all the family assets were divided among shareholders and uncles. All that was left for me was a nearly bankrupt hot pot chain. Isabella saw firsthand how I gritted my teeth and endured countless hardships to finally support this business. I refuse to believe she doesn't understand the impact Daniel opening a hot pot restaurant on this street would have on me. As Isabella's gaze swept over me and Sophia, she stayed silent for a few seconds before saying blandly, "Don't be petty. Helping Daniel won't hurt you." Hey, sure, no harm, I thought. Daniel dumps a woman, then says he wants her back, and I'm supposed to hand her over? Now he wants to steal my customers, and I'm supposed to smile and help him? What nerve he has. "Victor, why don't you come along?" Daniel asked sincerely, inviting me again. I turned my head, sneering. He's busy, not available. Sophia, who had been quietly standing by, suddenly spoke up, surprising everyone. All eyes turned to her, but her expression stayed the same. Her delicate brows arched slightly as she smiled at Isabella. He's coming to my place. Then she tilted her head playfully, sticking out her tongue at me. Didn't you say you'd take responsibility for me? Let's go, shall we? Taking responsibility, the way she phrased it was pretty subtle. I glanced gratefully at Sophia and smiled. Let's go. Going home with someone you just met? Victor, do you have no shame? Isabella's words came almost immediately. Everyone present was shocked by her remark. I frowned, feeling a surge of anger. And you, she continued, holding on to your current girlfriend while managing your ex. Do you have any shame? Shouldn't you be focused on helping Daniel with his hot pot business? Why do you care where I go? To clarify, Miss Liu unexpectedly, Sophia, who had already reached the door, turned back and smiled at Isabella, her eyebrows slightly raised. Victor and I didn't just meet. We have quite a history together. Hearing this, Isabella's expression froze, but Sophia turned around, wrapped her arm around mine, and started walking toward the door. The close contact made her fragrance linger near my nose. Half of my body felt numb from her touch. My mind was racing. Her words were odd, but honestly, she wasn't wrong. Buddy was indeed deeply hurt by me. A young dog lying on the balcony somehow looked prematurely aged. Buddy, I was wrong. I was really wrong. I bought luxury dog food. Please have a bite. I knelt on one knee on the floor, holding a bowl of dog food, sincerely apologizing to Buddy. Sophia sat quietly on the sofa, watching. I felt like she was laughing at me, but when I looked over at her, she wasn't smiling. It wasn't until Buddy finally allowed me to hold him and play with him that the sky outside had already turned dark. I'm hungry. Can you cook? Sophia suddenly asked. I was taken aback, then nodded. Yeah, Isabella had a picky palate, and there were many things she couldn't eat. After we got together, I did most of the cooking. After 4 years, my culinary skills were pretty refined. Cook me a meal. Sophia walked over, knelt on the carpet, and started playing with Buddy. She didn't even give me a chance to refuse. Since she didn't mind, there was no reason for me, a grown man, to be shy about it. I rolled up my sleeves and headed to the kitchen, preparing 2 dishes. Just as I was about to serve the dishes on the table, my phone suddenly rang loudly in my pocket. Startled, I almost dropped the plate. I quickly set down the dish and answered the call without checking the caller ID. Hello? Your stuff is still at my place. Come get them now. I paused, even looking at the phone screen to confirm. Isabella, she's asking me to pick up my things at this hour. It's too late. I'll send someone to get them tomorrow. The other end went silent. I could hear some faint, suppressed breaths. And then Isabella's cold voice. It has to be now. I was completely baffled and took a deep breath. Then just throw them away. Miss Liu, I said. The reason I was so intent on retrieving my stuff is that many items were gifts from my grandpa. But if getting them means more entanglements with Isabella, I'd rather just let them go. When someone dies, everything becomes meaningless. While my grandpa was alive, I fulfilled my duties as a grandson and have no regrets. These keepsakes, if I can keep them, great. If not, so be it. I sighed, ready to hang up when Sophia, who had just stood up from the carpet, suddenly let out a soft moan. Ow, that hurts. I quickly moved to support her arm. Have you been kneeling too long? Look, your knees are all red. Sophia, clearly annoyed, replied, How was I supposed to know you'd take this long? Simultaneously, a loud banging sound came from both the phone and the door outside. In shock and confusion, I heard Isabella's cold, teeth-clenched voice. Victor, are you coming out on your own, or should I break down the door and drag you out? I stared in a stunned disbelief. Isabella is actually outside the door. On the phone, her voice remained icy. 3, 2. I clenched my fist, took a deep breath, and suppressed the anger rising in my chest. I'll come out. With her spoiled princess syndrome, Isabella would absolutely do something drastic like breaking down the door. But it wasn't me who opened the door. It was Sophia. She stood in front of me, her expression defiant as she stared down Isabella outside the door. "Does Miss Lou need something?" Isabella's expression was dark. Her delicate fists clenched tightly, but she didn't acknowledge Sophia. Instead, her angry eyes focused on me. "You have time to spend 5 hours at her place, but no time to pick up your own things." I was at a loss for words. Is there no tomorrow for you? "Miss Lou, is one night really that critical?" "Daniel's staying at my place tonight," Isabella replied, her gaze fixed on me as she spoke calmly. "I don't want him to feel uncomfortable seeing your things. Also, I don't want you to accuse me of holding on to your belongings later. It's best if you take them yourself, once and for all." The wound in my heart was silently torn open, bleeding profusely. Unconsciously, I tightened my grip on the door handle and gave a cold, bitter smile. "Fine, I'll go get them now." This was the first time I sat in Isabella's car without wanting to say a word to her. Resting my head against the seat, I closed my eyes to relax. "Do you like her?" Surprisingly, Isabella was the one to break the silence. I frowned and opened my eyes, meeting her watery gaze in the rearview mirror. After a 3-second pause, I nodded. "Yes, she's pretty good." Pretty good. Looks like you've been doing quite well these past few days." "I thought maybe you would," she said. I raised an eyebrow. "Would what?" "Nothing." Isabella smiled, turned her gaze back to the road, and said nothing more. Jason had packed all my belongings. 2 large suitcases were sitting next to the dining table in the living room. Isabella sat at the table, calmly sipping water as she watched me, saying nothing. I had no intention of staying any longer in this familiar yet strange place. It was too painful. I grabbed the suitcase handles and turned to leave, but suddenly my wrist was grabbed tightly. "Victor, weren't you madly in love with me before? And now, after just a few days, you've moved on and are with another woman. Do you even believe that yourself?" In an instant, anger flared up inside me. Isabella's mocking talk about how I couldn't let go of her was far more humiliating than when she gave me the breakup fee. "Does it matter if I've moved on? What matters is that I've been a proper ex and haven't bothered you," I replied coolly. "But Miss Lou, what's your deal today? First time I've heard that Miss Lou keeps her lovers on retainer and provides after-sales service. Could it be that now you suddenly realized you can't bear to let me go?" Isabella continued to stare at me, a strange emotion flickering in her eyes. After 3 seconds of silence, she suddenly spoke. "What if I say yes?" My spine stiffened, and for a moment, I doubted whether I'd heard her correctly. Did Isabella really just say that? What did she mean? Isabella stood up from her chair and suddenly wrapped her arms around my waist, resting her cheek against my chest. She sighed. "Victor, if this is some kind of tactic of yours, then congratulations. You've won. Come back to me. Let's continue together. These days, haven't you missed me?" "I've been missing you a bit." Isabella's body was soft, and she looked at me with sultry eyes. The atmosphere was super suggestive, but I couldn't care less about that right now. All I wanted to know was whether Daniel, who was a real person, was still standing there while Isabella said those words. "Wait, what about Daniel?" Isabella narrowed her eyes and spoke with certainty. "I'll find a place for you. He'll never know. I want both of you." A string in my mind snapped abruptly. I forcefully pushed Isabella away, barely stopping myself from hitting her. "Where do you get the audacity to think I'd be willing to be your side guy? Does Isabella even see me as a person? How deeply must I have loved her for her to have such confidence?" "Victor?" Isabella didn't move, staring at me with a cold smile in her voice. "There's a limit to how much you can play hard to get. This is your one chance. If you walk out that door today, don't think about coming back." I turned back to glare at Isabella's darkened face, sneering coldly. Hold on tight to your Daniel and move on. If we meet again in this lifetime, it'll only be at the crematorium. After that day, I never saw Isabella again. After all, she's a high and mighty lady. Rejecting her so harshly, it's a wonder she didn't come after me for payback. But how could she possibly come looking for me again? Although Isabella didn't show up, Daniel's hot pot restaurant had a grand opening. The location was strategically chosen, just one street away from mine. To celebrate the opening, they offered a 70% discount for an entire month, burning money to attract customers. All the hot pot restaurants on the street were struggling to survive. And I managed to hang in there since I still had the 40 million win to back me up, so the losses weren't too bad. But even so, Daniel's restaurant still stole 30% of my customers. What can you do when you're up against a big player with deep pockets who burns money for fun? What can you do? I don't even know how long my savings will last. Squatting on the curb outside my restaurant, I stroked Buddy's head, looking into his big, round eyes. I clicked my tongue, gently tugging on his ear. I pointed to the financial report in my hand. Come on, Buddy, give me some analysis. What else can we do to make money besides price and flavor? Woof. Buddy suddenly perked up, barking twice toward the end of the street. I looked up, confused, only to see Sophia walking towards me in a beige dress and high heels. Her tall figure paired with her stunning looks made her a walking masterpiece. Doctor, you're off early today, I greeted her naturally. Since the blind date, Sophia and I had grown quite close, mainly because of Buddy. Her work as a doctor was unpredictable, so she left Buddy in my care most of the time. Pets aren't allowed inside the hot pot restaurant, so I set up a little umbrella outside for Buddy to stay under, guarding the entrance. Not many surgeries today? Sophia smiled, pulling a lollipop from her pocket and offering it to me. Something sweet to lift your spirits. I shook my head. No thanks, I'm not much of a candy guy. Sophia raised an eyebrow slightly, unwrapped the lollipop and held it up to my mouth. When I say eat, you eat. Open up. I froze for a moment, feeling oddly flustered. Just as I was about to reach out and take it myself, the leash in my hand was yanked suddenly. Caught off guard, I stumbled forward. Thankfully, Sophia reacted quickly, squatting down to catch me, preventing me from face-planting. But I ended up holding her in my arms. Thump, thump. Sophia's soft body leaned into mine. My heart rate skyrocketed. My face flushed. I quickly let go and stood up, flashing her an embarrassed smile. Wow, thanks for saving me. Otherwise, my handsome face would have been done for. Sophia stood up with me, but her expression was peculiar. She leaned in close to my ear and whispered, Mr. Su, your heart was racing just now. Were you falling for me? Since I saved you, shouldn't you repay me with your affection? Sophia's breath was warm against my ear, and her fragrance made my thoughts a bit chaotic. My eyes widened slightly. Wait, is she implying what I think she's implying? Is Sophia interested in me? This is bold. She's making the first move. Woof, woof, woof. Buddy's barking came just in time to save me. I glanced over and saw him baring his teeth at a customer who had just left my restaurant, blocking their path. Oh no! I quickly ran over and grabbed his leash. Buddy, they paid. They can go. Don't block the way. Buddy growled softly in his throat. But after a few seconds, he finally stepped aside. I hurriedly apologized to the customer and made sure they left without any more trouble. As I looked up, I caught sight of Daniel walking across the street from my restaurant. His expression was grim, as if he had just had an argument with someone. How strange. He's supposed to be the big winner in life, with both love and career going well. Yet he looks so down. Well, it's none of my business. I crouched down and hugged Buddy's head, letting out a sigh of relief. Thanks for saving me, Buddy. Otherwise, I really wouldn't have known how to respond to Sophia. What I didn't expect was this. That same evening, Sophia, Buddy, and I ended up trending on social media. Earlier in the day, a popular vlogger with millions of followers happened to be live streaming at my restaurant. They found it amusing when they saw me sitting on the curb, asking Buddy to help me with the financial report, and they aimed the camera at us. Then they caught the entire interaction between Sophia and me, along with Buddy's antics, live on stream. Hashtag watchdog, hash dog boss analyzes financials, hash beautiful coupleship, hash pure love drama, hash brave beautiful doctor, hash handsome innocent restaurateur, hash totally shippable. Several hashtags quickly climbed the trending list. The phone rang around 2 a.m. I was deep asleep, head buried under the covers, and groggily answered, "Who's this?" There was silence on the other end. I waited a few seconds, frowning, my voice growing more annoyed. "Hello, speak up. Who is this? If you don't say anything, I'm hanging up." "Victor, who gave you the nerve to actually be with her? Do you want to die?" Isabella's voice came through the receiver. The next second, I hung up the phone, rolled over, and went back to sleep. Just before drifting off, I muttered in my dreams, "How scary." The viral explosion of that video was beyond anything I could have imagined. People started flocking to my hot pot restaurant, and it quickly became a trendy spot. Every day, there was a long line stretching out the door. In just a few days, the 30% of customers that Daniel had stolen from me came back tenfold, thanks to Sophia and Buddy. So, as I was closing the restaurant one evening, Daniel showed up, smiling as he congratulated me. "Congratulations, Victor. Your restaurant is really popular." I looked up and smiled, but didn't respond, cutting straight to the point. "What do you want?" It was closing time, and I wanted him to leave, not sit around. The smile on Daniel's face faded, no longer pretending to be friendly. He looked at me with arrogance and coldness. "Victor, name your price." I was taken aback. "You want to buy my restaurant?" "Not just that." Daniel's gaze was heavy as he looked at me. "I want you to disappear from the city completely." I gestured to the waitress cleaning up nearby, signaling that she could go home. Then I looked back at Daniel, my tone dripping with disdain. "What kind of nonsense is this? Beijing is a big city. As long as you two stay away from me, I think we can avoid each other for the rest of our lives." Daniel let out a cold laugh, his eyes full of arrogance and contempt. "Victor, don't think that just because you're cozying up to Sophia, you and your shabby restaurant can break into the upper-class circle. Do you even know her background? Even if you wanted to marry into her family, they'd never accept someone from a small-time hot pot business like yours. So, here's some advice. Don't be ungrateful while your restaurant still has some value. And before I decide to completely ruin you, take the money and get lost." As harsh as his words were, I had to admit Daniel's thinking was pretty clear, unexpectedly so. Honestly, my hot pot restaurant is quite profitable, and I'm not short on money, but in Beijing's elite circles, it's nothing impressive. In terms of matching up to Sophia, I really don't. But what I don't understand is this. Daniel, I just don't get it. When I was with Isabella, you two weren't even together. You chose to leave her. When you came back, I walked away without a word. I didn't fight, didn't cause any trouble, didn't offend you. So why are you so determined to target me? After I asked my question, a flicker of anger flashed across Daniel's face. He then let out a cold snort. "Isabella may be blinded, but I'm not. It's obvious she still has feelings for you. If I don't act now, am I supposed to wait for you to come back and replace me?" Daniel spoke angrily, still maintaining his arrogant demeanor, but I could tell he wasn't doing too well. "Since I came back, she hasn't let me touch her, and she keeps staring at her phone, lost in thought. A few days ago, I tried to kiss her, and she instinctively said, 'Victor, stop fooling around. What kind of person do you think you are? Do you think you're worthy of competing with me? Even if I said I didn't want her, what makes you think you could pick her up? And I don't know what's wrong with Sophia's eyes to be dumb enough to fall for someone as dirty as you.'" "Not as dirty as your mouth." Sophia's voice came from the doorway. Both Daniel and I were stunned, watching her as she walked over and stood in front of me, shielding me. At least Victor lives with integrity, loving and hating with all his heart. Unlike some people, who have skin as thick as a city wall, you gave her up, and now you shamelessly come crawling back. You said you went abroad to chase your dreams, but in reality you failed and got sent back, didn't you? From my angle, I couldn't see Sophia's expression, but I could clearly see that Daniel's face had gone pale. Just as I was marveling at the power of her words, Sophia suddenly turned to me, a mischievous smile on her face. "Don't worry, my family doesn't have mouths as filthy as his. When we choose a son-in-law, we look at character and how we feel about the person." She paused and nodded towards Buddy at the door. "Our dog does too." Me. That kind of sounded like an insult. By the time I closed the shop, it was already late at night. The neighborhood was quiet, with fallen leaves rustling silently underfoot. Sophia and I walked side by side, taking Buddy for a walk as we headed home. "Sorry, Miss Jiang, I keep bothering you by borrowing Buddy." "It's nothing," Sophia replied, smiling as she looked at Buddy. "He's grown up now. It's time for him to work and support the family." I chuckled along, hesitating for a few seconds before speaking up about the online rumors about us. "I'm sorry. For a young woman like you to be the subject of gossip like this must be damaging to your reputation." Sophia stopped in her tracks. Under the streetlight, her eyes sparkled as she stepped closer, hooking her arm around my neck. Her red lips were inches from my face, her big eyes blinking playfully. "Is that an apology? I thought it would be a reply." "Mr. Victor, I'm so beautiful. Don't you find me attractive?" Here we go again. Even though I knew I wasn't in love with Sophia yet, this woman handpicked by my grandpa was incredibly alluring. Who could resist a stunning beauty like her when she's being so forward? I instantly tensed up, my toes curling in my shoes. I quickly disentangled myself and pointed to the entrance of my building behind me. "I'm home. Good night." With that, I turned and dashed into the building, practically fleeing. Sophia's laughter echoed behind me. "Victor, you're too adorable." Even as I exited the elevator, my face was still flushed. I took a deep breath, silently scolding myself. "Victor, how old are you? Haven't you seen a beautiful woman or been in love before? It's just a woman confessing to you. Why are you getting so nervous?" I slapped my cheeks lightly, trying to regain composure. But as I looked up and took a step forward, I nearly jumped out of my skin at the sight of someone standing at my door. It was Isabella, whom I hadn't seen in over a month. "Looks like you've been having a good time these days." Isabella's face was cold as she stepped toward me. The sound of her high heels clicking on the floor echoed loudly in the quiet night. Instinctively, I took a step back. I couldn't help it. This version of Isabella was a bit intimidating. But as soon as I stepped back, it was as if I had provoked her. She suddenly took a big stride forward and threw herself into my arms. "Victor, hold me, kiss me, I really missed you." Our lips collided, tangled together with the taste of alcohol. My heart sank, and I quickly pushed her away. "Isabella, what are you doing?" Isabella staggered back a few steps, leaning against the wall, drunkenly staring at me. Her eyes were full of hurt. "Are you really with her?" I frowned and opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, Isabella continued forcefully, "Break up with her, come back to me, let's start over." Then, as if something inside her broke, her shoulders slumped and her voice softened. "Victor, you've really won. You've completely won. I really can't stand seeing you with someone else. The day you took your things, I thought I wouldn't care if you left. But for over a month now, all I can think about is you. Nothing feels right without you. The thought of you being with Sophia makes me want to drag you back right now." If she had said these words at any point during the past 4 years, I would have been moved to tears and completely devoted to her. If Isabella had shown this kind of sincere remorse just a month earlier, she wouldn't have needed to ask. I would have offered her my heart. But it's too late. Far too late. I shook my head gently, taking the opportunity to push her away and turn toward my apartment. "Sorry, but what does this have to do with me? Go back to Daniel and focus on your life together. Stop dwelling on things that don't matter." I unlocked the door with my fingerprint, and the lock beeped as it opened. As I gently pulled the door open, a desperate voice called out from behind me. "I broke up with him. Is that good enough?" My eyes widened. "What do you mean? Is that good enough? As if I had been forcing her into anything. If I had the power to make her do something, would I have been humiliated like that before? Isabella took a few steps toward me, but ultimately stopped short. Maybe it was the alcohol, but I've spent this time trying to convince myself that I've always loved Daniel. I thought I was supposed to love him, but something's not right. Nothing feels right. I can't even stand him touching me. I stepped inside, my emotions surprisingly calm. Isabella, it doesn't matter anymore. Who you love has nothing to do with me. I really don't care. As long as you don't love me. I stepped inside, my emotions surprisingly calm. Isabella, it doesn't matter anymore. Who you love has nothing to do with me. I really don't care. As long as you don't love me, that's all that matters. Then tell me. Isabella's voice grew frantic, like a child denied a treat. What do I have to do to get you back? I tightened my grip on the door handle, not turning around. You might want to call the police. I didn't expect it, but Isabella didn't call the police. I did because something happened at my restaurant. Over a dozen customers fell ill with food poisoning after eating at my hot pot restaurant and were hospitalized. Someone anonymously reported serious food safety issues at my restaurant. At the same time, the story of how I replaced Daniel and simped for Isabella was twisted and dug up online. The post was long and filled with accusations against me. It claimed that I shamelessly took advantage of Daniel's time abroad to steal Isabella from him. Suddenly, all the people who had been fans of me and Sophia as a couple were furious and disillusioned. The online hate against me was relentless. But amidst all this bad news, there was actually a silver lining. And that was, I also got food poisoning. Since I had no place to call home, I'd been eating all my meals with the ingredients from my hot pot restaurant. The netizens who were ready to condemn me were suddenly confused. Okay, now I believe the food poisoning was an accident. All right, I'll reluctantly believe in your hot pot restaurant, but I still doubt your character. Wait a minute. Fans who refuse to give up on the ship are screaming. If Victor got food poisoning, did he go to Sophia's hospital? Yes, and as it happens, Sophia was the one treating me. Sophia stood beside my hospital bed in her white coat, adjusting the flow of my IV with a serious expression. She was usually so warm and gentle that her stern demeanor now caught me off guard. I mumbled from under the covers. Is it serious? It's not serious, Sophia replied calmly. Just rest for a few days. Then why do you look so stern? Because this is a serious matter. Sophia finished recording my information and turned to leave, casually adding, no sugar for you in the next couple of days. The sudden change in topic left me confused, and I nodded dumbly. Okay. Tisk, tisk. Looks like someone's in trouble if Sophia is mad. The handsome police officer sitting by my bed, taking my statement, suddenly shook his head with a knowing look. His familiar tone made me blink in surprise. Why do you say that? The officer smirked. Because whoever did this to you, even if they turned to ashes, Sophia would dig them up to question them. How foolish can someone be to mess with Sophia? Just because she doesn't have to take over the family business doesn't mean she isn't well educated. Her family, even the dogs, are practically geniuses. Do you think they're good people? Suddenly, the medicine being pumped into my body felt a little too cold. No way, right? Sophia, who's always so gentle and kind, could she really be that terrifying? As it turns out, she really could. Even though someone had already confessed to the incident at my hot pot restaurant, the police were relentless and dug deeper until they eventually dragged Daniel into it. It turned out that on the night Isabella came to me drunk, asking to get back together and was rejected, she went home and kept saying my name, wanting me back, and telling Daniel she wanted to break up with him. Daniel, humiliated and enraged, came up with the scheme to get rid of me once and for all. But now, with the police's public announcement, Daniel's reputation in the industry was thoroughly ruined. At the same time, the entire story of my relationship with Isabella was uncovered by netizens. Wait, so Daniel never even accepted Isabella's confession. How is that? Getting someone stolen? He didn't want her. She was cherished by someone else for 4 years. And then he had the audacity to come back and try to claim her. My God. I work at a wedding planning company, and I can confirm that the day Daniel returned, Victor had decorated the villa to propose to Isabella. As soon as that comment appeared, it caused a huge uproar. People began tagging Isabella, sarcastically reminding her, "You missed out on such a heartfelt proposal. You missed out on someone who loved you so much. So, Isabella, do you regret it now?" And the most shocking thing was that Isabella actually replied, "Yes, I deeply regret it. I'm trying to make amends and win him back." When Sophia saw that comment, I was sitting in my hospital bed, eating an apple. She suddenly turned her head to look at me, which caught me off guard. "What? What is it? Am I not allowed to eat apples?" Sophia shook her head, but her expression remained somber and her voice was quiet. "You can eat it." "Oh," I nodded skeptically, taking a small bite. "If," Sophia suddenly spoke again, making me pause mid-bite and cough. I cleared my throat, thoroughly confused. "If what?" "Nothing?" Sophia shook her head again. "I was just thinking that if you really are stupid enough to go back to her, I'll set my dog on you." I eventually figured out what Sophia meant because that very night, Isabella showed up in my hospital room. She was dressed beautifully, her eyes shining. "Victor, I know everything now." I was completely stunned. "What? What do you know?" Before I could react further, Isabella reached into her pocket and pulled out a red velvet box. "Don't open it." I blurted out instinctively, "I already know that you were planning to propose to me that day." Isabella's delicate fingers froze, and she looked up at me, tears welling in her eyes. "Victor, we were supposed to get married. I'm ready to marry you now. You loved me so much before. You were so good to me. You haven't really given up on me, have you? I regret breaking up with you." "I was wrong. I've broken up with Daniel. I won't waver again. Come back to me. Let's start over." "No." I shook my head and quietly took the ring box from her hand. I held it, turning it over like a walnut. "Yes, it's true. I was planning to propose to you that day, but Isabella, you missed your chance." Isabella's eyes darkened. She shook her head, her tone stubborn. "No, you love me, Victor. You've loved me for so many years. How could you give up on me so easily? We haven't missed our chance. If you come back, we can start over, can't we?" Our eyes locked, and the stubbornness and deep affection in Isabella's gaze were so clear. For a moment, I felt a strange certainty, as if there was no mistake. This time, she truly wouldn't give up on me. And there was also a sense that if I refused her, she wouldn't stop until one of us was broken. I pressed my lips together, unsure of what to say. Just as I was about to speak, I caught a glimpse of a shadow outside the door, a person and a dog passing by. "All right, I'll give you a chance." I smiled and nodded. Then, under Isabella's hopeful gaze, I casually tossed the ring box out the window. "If you find that ring, I'll start over with you." Isabella's eyes trembled as she stared at me. Then she nodded solemnly. "All right." On the day I was discharged, Sophia came with Buddy. I was standing by the window in my hospital room, quietly watching Isabella searching in the garden below. After several days of searching, she found the ring box, but the ring inside was still missing. Who knows if it was lost or picked up by someone? If she finds it, are you really going to get back together with her? Sophia appeared beside me, her expression dark and her tone sour. Buddy stood proudly by her left leg, looking ready to attack if I dared to say yes. I couldn't help but laugh, of course. Sophia's face turned black instantly. I grinned mischievously at her and pulled a man's ring from my pocket. But that's only if she actually finds it. Since Isabella wasn't willing to give up, I had to solve the problem my own way. She needed to experience the feeling of working so hard, almost reaching the light, only to be plunged into deep despair. I had once handed her my heart. She caught it but didn't cherish it. Instead, she casually tossed it aside and even stomped on it. So why should I forgive her just because she realized she was wrong? "Tisk," Sophia clicked her tongue and shook her head, but the smile on her lips was impossible to hide. Mr. Su, you're quite ruthless. So bad, but I like it. By the way, Mr. Su, can I get an answer now? About our blind date, do you want to take it further? I raised an eyebrow and tilted my head, not answering immediately. Instead, I crouched down to pat Buddy's head, laughing. Buddy, what do you think? Woof.